those who want to make money, Zimbabwe is open for business.
I like that.
We have a labor force that is highly educated and it can adapt to any skills or technologies that can be introduced. Yes, we are a small country with a small population, but God blessed our country with lots of resources. Currently, we are 21 years with sanctions imposed by the West on us. The intention was to cripple our economy and have regime change. To a great extent, they succeeded in collapsing our economy, but we decided to look inwards and depend on our own domestic resources to survive. And we have done that. And currently, our economy is on the growth trajectory. Instead of continuing to go down, it is now growing. And we are focusing on growing it on the basis of internal resources which we have. So we would want investments to come in. But as a result of the perception that Zimbabwe is under sanctions, many investors shun our country. There's a perception of political issues in the country, economic issues in the country, but I would like to assure investors that we are politically stable. Zimbabwe is in a peculiar position with regard to these issues because of our history and our current position in the international arena, where we are an isolated country on the basis that we have stuck our guns to be ourselves and do develop our country with the view that we are a people who have their own priorities determined by ourselves and not by anybody else. That's the first thing. Secondly, perception influences the outside world. Perception and reality do not always meet. There's a lot of misconception about Zimbabwe, especially by the West, just because we've chosen to be ourselves. My view is that first and foremost, each African country, or Africa as a continent, should prioritize what we want and invite investment in the areas we ourselves want. The development of a country should not be determined from outside. It should be an internal priority in terms of the order of development. Is it agriculture? Is it mining? Is it tourism? Infrastructure development? We have to make those choices ourselves. Secondly, before we spend the time addressing the perception of the outside world, I think it is necessary for us as Africa to integrate ourselves, understand ourselves as a continent, share what we have in terms of resources. Africa has abundant resources. It has youthful population. It has now the knowledge that the developed world have traveled a journey of developing their countries. And we are in that advantage that as we wish to leapfrog and develop our respective countries, we should not fall into the similar mistakes which the other countries, the developed countries went through. If we fail to recognize that we need to chart our own development pathway, then we will find that we will be divided. We will look outside Africa when we could have answers within Africa. So it is my view that in particular for Zimbabwe, we cherish collaboration. We cherish to share our challenges with our brothers and sisters on the continent before we look out. So I don't think that the outside world would love to see Africa develop to an extent that we are competitive with them. They would want to see Africa as a source of their raw materials to develop their own economies. Well, hence, I appeal to our brothers and sisters in Africa that God gave us this continent and we must develop it. Yes, we are not going to invent the wheel, but we must make choices which fit our level of development by collaboration. On the continent, we are one of the highest literate nation on the continent in terms of education. It is necessary that as we develop, as my brother said, connectivity, we need to have roads, infrastructure which talk to each other with neighbors and with regions. We need to have railway systems which are able to talk to each other in terms of our neighbors as well as with the region in Africa, as well as the air linkages between us and the rest of Africa. At the time of our independence, for instance, because we're a British colony, if we wanted to come to Ghana, which is a former British colony also, we first have to go to London and then come back to Africa to Accra. And when we go back to London to report and then go back to Harare. That was stupid. So we need to have internal connectivity as Africa. We have decided that most importantly, food security is primary. And we've focused and developed mitigation against climate change in our country. For instance, now for the rest of the history of our country, we're importing wheat from Ukraine or Russia. But because we felt that it is necessary under the circumstances that we should build dams, develop irrigation in our country, we now have adequate wheat for ourselves and surplus. And the same with regard to grain. As a result of developing our own and having internal focusing on the abundant arable land which we have, we are secured. We are now a food security country. And that's what we should do. We have minerals. In the past, all our minerals go out, but we have now focused on the issue of beneficiation of our minerals. Also, even in the agricultural sector, processing, we are developing that. Just as an example, when the pandemic, this pandemic, COVID-19 attacked us, because we are a country under sanctions, we did not receive anything from the global West to support us on mitigating the impact of COVID-19. We looked inwards and there are very some resources from other infrastructure development to develop our own resilience and acquire vaccines. For instance, the issue of medical oxygen. We could not access medical oxygen, so we assembled some of our young scientists, young girls and young boys, and within 9 to 12 months, we were able to produce our own medical oxygen. And now Zimbabwe uses about 150 tons of medical oxygen a month. But we are now producing that amount in a week.
I'm a king, yes, I'm a king, I think I'm a king,